Hey guys, welcome to Breaking the Set. I want to take a moment to pay my respects to a man named Herman Wallace. He died today from liver cancer at the age of 71. See, Wallace was a former inmate at the Louisiana State Penitentiary in Angola and spent the last 41 years of his life in solitary confinement. Earlier this week, he was released from prison after a judge granted him a new trial because of the unfair jury selection of all white males during his first one. Wallace was originally imprisoned for robbery and moved to solitary after allegedly stabbing a prison guard during a riot. He claimed that he was singled out because he was a member of the Black Panther Party and organized protests against prison conditions. And after years of appeals, Wallace's murder conviction was finally overturned. Unfortunately, he died shortly after being released. And while some are happy that at least he's spent his last hours as a free man, it's an utter travesty that Wallace lived the last 41 years in a tiny cell, virtually no human contact, all for a crime he may not have committed. Guess that's 21st century justice in the most incarcerated country on earth. Breaking news, guys. A woman rammed her car into a gate near the White House.
Getting a look now at new eyewitness video of much of the car chase. It started near the White House and ended on Capitol Hill.
Brett, the president clearly has been briefed about the shooting. It's unclear if he was briefed about the ramming of the gates.
The whole thing was all over in less than an hour, but it lent a chaotic element to an already tense situation on Capitol Hill.
34-year-old Miriam Carey reportedly suffered postpartum depression. Her one-year-old child was in the back seat.
After engaging in a high-speed car chase at the Capitol, Miriam Carey was shot in the head and killed. Yes, instead of shooting out the car tires, another unarmed person has been executed by police for acting erratically. I guess that's just the way things operate in the overly militarized US of A. And what should have just been another random tragedy in a city turned into a full-blown circus by the corporate media. Now, media pundits are psychoanalyzing the woman. All afternoon, CNN was talking about how Carey was convinced that Obama was monitoring her. Wait, I'm confused. Why does that make her crazy? Obama is monitoring her, along with the rest of us. Obviously, I'm not trying to take away from the seriousness of this incident, but you would think that facing an imminent war with Syria just mere weeks ago would have given the media some perspective on how to balance the coverage of important news stories. Instead of actually giving news updates on stories from around the world, the media fixates on one story 24/7, whether it be dropping missiles on Syria or a woman slamming a car into a fence. So, what do I mean by perspective? Well, America was rocked by the news of the Navy Yard shooting and this latest incident. But do you think people would even know that these events didn't occur on federal property? Consider the number of shootings that happened right here in D.C. over the last couple months, mere blocks away from the Capitol. Shootings that didn't even get a peep from the corporate news. In fact, in the 5 days leading up to the Navy Yard massacre, there were 10 separate shootings across the district, like these two that occurred in Northwest D.C., leaving 1 dead and 2 injured on September 12th. Or how about this drive-by that happened just 3 days after that in Southeast D.C., resulting in 2 victims going to the hospital. Perhaps most disturbingly is this drive-by shooting that happened just a few months ago, not too far from where I live, in which a gunman sprayed bullets on innocent pedestrians. Check this out. Miraculously, no one was killed in this random act of violence, but sadly, 13 people were injured, and 1 remains in critical condition. But there was no flood of cop cars and lockdown of surrounding neighborhoods. In fact, it took police months to even apprehend a suspect. In 2013 alone, there have already been 144 homicides in D.C., according to Homicide Watch D.C. And keep in mind, D.C. is not even the murder capital of the country anymore. That honor goes to Chicago, a city that has seen a grisly 325 homicides so far this year. But of course, you don't hear about any of these incidents outside of local news. Maybe it's because these people didn't get shot next to a national monument, or maybe it's because they're the wrong color. Whatever the reason, it's obvious that all the corporate media cares about is exploiting fear in order to keep those eyeballs glued to the screen. In the wake of the global financial crisis, Europe was hit the worst. Ireland, a country of 4.5 million people, is still coping with the effects of negligent banking practices. Now, just to give you an idea of the corruption surrounding the Irish banking system, when asked how Anglo-Irish Bank had come up with its bailout figure, the bank's executive said, "I picked it out of my arse." That's a direct quote. Because of these nefarious banks, austerity measures have severely impacted millions of Irish. And one political party is fighting back against the financial system that's led to the foreclosure of thousands of Irish homes. The Direct Democracy Party has been around only for 3 years, but it's already gaining huge momentum across the country. The party's leader, Ben Gilroy, joined me earlier to talk about his political platform and why he's being persecuted by the Irish media and government.
Direct democracy is where people can initiate referendum. Most countries, the people in the country can't do that. We had it in our first constitution, and them rights were taken out then when our second constitution came in. We want them articles put back. It'd be a bit like the Swiss model. The Swiss model can initiate referendum on anything they wish once they gather enough signatures.
And what is the benefit if people don't understand really the process of referendums?
Okay, well, the process that we have is representative democracy. So that's where a guy comes. In Ireland, they generally lie to you during the election. You vote for him. You can't change him for the next 5 years. He breaks every promise known to man. I mean, if you take our last government that are now in power, these guys said they wouldn't bail out any more bondholders or rogue banks, and have actually, rode back on all them promises, and are actually bailing banks and rogue traders out more so than the last government did. And we have to put up with that for the next 5 years. We're a powerless nation.
And most people who don't know a lot about Irish politics, can you tell them why the Labour and Fine Gael parties are not properly leading the country?
Well, some time ago, around 2008, 2009 in this country, when the banks basically failed all over Europe, it was kicked off by Anglo-Irish Bank in this country, who were probably the most criminal of all banks. They broke every liquidity law that carries jail sentences. Instead, our government at Fianna Fáil at the time gave them all big bonuses. Our regulator, who should have been done for treason, got a 600,000 payoff as well as a big pension. Our new government, who are now in power, Fine Gael and Labour, of course, were saying all the right things before they got into power. And then when they got into power, they're actually worse than the last crowd.
Sounds like this country, Ben. What are the main policies that your party would implement if you had representation in Parliament?
Well, first of all, we would, you see, rather than saying burn bondholders, that seems to be a very populist thing to say. What we would suggest in direct democracy, that we would suspend all capital and interest payments until there's a full legal review to see if Ireland had any moral or lawful obligation to pay back gamblers on a stock exchange. So it doesn't sound so crazy when you say let's have a legal review about it, because I believe it's classed as an odious death in international law.
And Ben, the Irish media has tried to connect you with the Freemen on the Land movement, a group that the FBI has deemed a terrorist movement. Why do you think that they've tried to link you to this group?
I think because I shot the fame one time when, you see, there's a fallout from this bailout in our country because we're such a small country. We only have 4.5 million people. So for your viewers, to put that into context, we're slightly larger than Liverpool or Manchester. And they've taken 120 billion out of our economy to refinance the banks and pay off bond gamblers on a stock exchange. And then they've asked the Irish people, when they've paid back this money, when they've taken this money out of the economy, to continue paying your mortgage payments with no money in the economy to pay it. So the fallout of that is now you have repossessions in this country where sheriffs come with the Gardaí, which is our police force, to try evict families out of their homes, and they're not guilty of anything. Now, unlike most countries in our constitution, the family home is protected and is inviolable, save as to law. And it clearly states it's not positive law, you know, so people who don't know what that is, that would be acts and statutes. So our family, because our Irish history is used to oppression from British forces from years ago and stuff like that, so it's enshrined in our constitution. So I became quite famous from a video, if anybody wants to see it on YouTube. It's called Constitution Halts Sheriff.
Well, we actually have a clip of that right now. Let's check it out.
Okay.
The registrar gives the order.
Yes.
Then he puts on his sheriff's hat and tells you go and repossess the home.
Exactly,
and you think that's fair.
That's right.
And lawful.
Yeah.
No, well, I'm telling you it's not. And I'm asking the Gardaí today to uphold common law, which they're sworn to do. And this is not common law. Now, also under the Constitution, a man's house is inviolable under the Constitution except as to law. What law did this man break?
I'm not saying he broke any law.
Right.
At the end of this clip, you actually forced this deputy sheriff to leave. Why did you take this action? And do you think if more people simply stood up to the immoral home foreclosures that we would see a change in policy?
Yes, you absolutely would, because if it became less attractive and harder for banks to take homes and businesses back, it wouldn't be financially viable. And that's all they're worried about, is the dollar, the bottom line, the profit. So if you made it unprofitable for them, now we have stopped the number of auctions in this country as well. Because look, we have a moral duty to stand up against tyranny, you know, and that's our moral duty. We must do this. And that clip there, see where the guy, he said he was the sheriff. This is another con. In our country, the sheriff can be also the judge. They double job, right? Get this. So this guy who actually signed the order, he was the judge on that day in the courthouse that deciding to take this man's home. Then he steps down and puts on a sheriff's uniform and comes out to repossess the home, making money on that as well. I mean, you wouldn't see this in a hilly-billy movie.
Well, let's talk about your current legal predicament. You're facing trespassing charges for occupying a farm. You allege that this is a trumped-up charge meant to discredit you. Why?
Well, I live at home with my young family and I drop my kids to school every day. And apparently they can't serve a summons on me. So what they done was they summoned me to court through our national newspapers. So if that's not political assassination, saying I was criminally trespassing on some lands. Now, I mean, you know, if they really are interested in criminal activity, they could do a lot worse than look away from me and look elsewhere.
And I know that this movement's picking up a lot of traction across the country. Talk about how many people are getting involved and how can more people get involved if they're interested.
Sure. In our country, we've set up directdemocracy.ie, and we've several counties and constituencies then. So, I mean, if you were to look on Facebook, you would see these names probably mean nothing to you now, but it'd be Direct Democracy Drogheda, Direct Democracy Offaly, and they're all the areas in Ireland. And it's, you know, considering we only launched just before Christmas, and in a by-election, I bet the Labour Party, who are sitting in government right now, I bet them in the by-election. And considering that the main media even completely ignored me, it wasn't a bad result.
Yes, they tend to ostracize, minimize the true third-party representation. Seems across the board. Ben, thank you so much for being the change. Ben Gilroy, leader of Direct Democracy Ireland.
Thanks, folks.
Still ahead, hip-hop artist Cale Sampson breaks the stage. Stay tuned. Hip-hop is a genre of music that's taken many forms over the years. Today, I want to focus on a new style of hip-hop called info-rap. It's how socially conscious artist and rising hip-hop star Cale Sampson describes his music. The Canadian musician is using his talents to draw attention to society's flaws by inviting people to question authority and think critically. I first noticed Cale in a viral video when he was rapping a cappella to an audience of hundreds, if not thousands, at Occupy Toronto. So I invited Cale to the studio to perform some songs off his latest album, The Big Picture. His first song is called Reach Up.
Considering everything that's going on in the world these days, I think this song is only fitting. It's time to unite, time to reach up and defend all our rights. There's so many people in pain. It's time to reach up, time to create a change. It's time that we speak, time to reach up and demand world peace. that we've all got to believe. We've got to reach up if we want to be free. The top 1% of the population own 40% of the wealth. Over 30,000 children die every day in poverty from lack of health. This wealth gap keeps increasing between rich and poor. There's more slavery now than ever before. Although democracy is supposed to be equal, government is controlled by a small group of people. Bankers and corporations are in charge. They finance presidents who then help them make laws. All the candidates are really pre-selected. It doesn't matter which party ends up elected. Central banks control the money supply. The crazy thing is that they're all privatized. Every dollar that's printed and never exists is a loan that we need to pay back with interest. Fractional reserve system's a scam, keeps the whole nation in debt, and that's the plan. This is happening across the whole entire world. It only leads to global empire. The US uses the World Bank and IMF to pay off politicians and put countries in debt. That debt's so big they can never repay, so they're forced to sell all the resources as a trade. At the end of the day, it's all nothing more than economic bribery and extortion. So more and more people are becoming desperate, potential terrorists that can be arrested, and your home can be searched now without a warrant. You can be detained indefinitely and tortured. These laws are designed to destroy our liberties, so when we fight back it limits our abilities. It's time to unite, time to reach up and defend all our rights. There's so many people in pain. It's time to reach up, time to create a change. It's time that we speak, time to reach up and demand world peace. That we've all got to believe, we've got to reach up if we want to be free. We live in a system based on profit, regardless of what the environmental cost is. So in this society, monetary gain always comes first before people's well-being. Now think about the theory of supply and demand. Everything is worth more, the less of it that's on hand. So if the goal is to make money by any means, it makes sense to deny people of what they need. In reality, energy is abundant. There's no need for anyone to die of hunger. Everyone on earth could be housed if we wanted, but technology that could help isn't funded. Instead, businesses that control market share purposely keep all our resources scarce. So people are forced to fight, cheat, or lie because there's not enough money for us all to survive. When greed and corruption is rewarded, it means our whole value system is distorted. We need to think critically, change our perception. Almost everything we've been told is a deception. For centuries, things like race and religion have been used to keep us focused on division. We've been conditioned to see ourselves as different from everything else, and that's the point we're missing. Humans are trained to look at disparities that are trivial compared to our similarities. And not just with people, we're talking about completely detaching from nature itself. Our planet's a system that's interconnected. Everything we do, something else is affected. Without animals, elements, or plants, we can't survive on this earth. Humans have no chance. So look at everything as an extension of you. Atomically, we're all the same, it's just a different worldview. And the faster this realization spreads, the better off the world will be moving ahead.
Cale, awesome performance. Thank you so much for that. You describe yourself as kind of an info rapper. What is info rap?
Info rap is sort of a moniker I use to describe my style of hip-hop, and essentially what it is information-oriented. My songs are kind of like essays, you know, and they're sort of delivered in rhyme form, and they're based on a lot of research and analysis. I try to fact-check and cross-reference all of my information, and I use it to present to the public through the popular culture medium of hip-hop. So you have info rap, and they're a little bit distinctive in terms of the song format is not really typical. Like I've got a song called The Money Song, which is 8 minutes long. And sometimes when you're dealing with this type of heavy information, you know, you can't just all condense it into a 2.5 minute traditional song.
So like whole history lessons about these concepts.
I guess so.
And why did you choose hip hop to display messages about these deeper political issues?
Okay, well, I was initially introduced to hip-hop at a very young age. I was about 9 years old, and fortunately, my initial influences were political and socially conscious MCs like Chuck D from Public Enemy and KRS, and at a very early age, I realized hip-hop's ability to bridge people and bridge cultures together. And so I've always had sort of a positive message ever since I was young, since I first started. And it sort of took on a bit of a political slant after 9/11 happened back in 2001. I wrote a song called The Facts of War. And when I was doing my research for that song, I started uncovering a lot of information that I wasn't expecting to find, that didn't quite fit with the official stories, so to speak. And I realized when I tried to talk to my friends or other people about this stuff, it was harder for them to absorb it just in conversation or if I give them a book. But I realized if I put music behind it and rapped it and added some flair, then the message that I was trying to communicate was much more well received. So hip-hop is just a very effective medium for me to use right now to get this information out there.
Awesome. And you've risen in the ranks of Canadian hip-hop, and you've been called on multiple publications, rising star in Canada. How does it feel to you as a Canadian, looking at kind of your sister neighbor country, being this global hegemon, kind of this imperialistic force of just military aggression in the world? Because I know that a lot of your lyrics are actually about American policy and kind of this militarism that we're seeing and class struggles that kind of stem from the U.S. How do you reconcile that?
Canada is a smaller, like you said, the sister country of the U.S. We only have 30 million people, but yet we're next door neighbors with this powerhouse whose policies are affecting the world on an international level. And when I was first starting writing my album and writing about political issues, I didn't really think it was the best idea for me to focus specifically on Canadian politics because the U.S., their policies affect the world. They have an international reach that affects us all. So I kind of that's why I choose to focus more so on U.S. as opposed to just Canadian-centric policies that would probably only appeal to a Canadian population. I'm trying to talk about global issues that affect humanity as a whole. So it's unfortunate, but I have to focus in on U.S. politics specifically.
Right, of course it bleeds into a lot, like you said, the media culture, the political establishment in Canada. I mean, a lot of it is influenced by this country. Your song Reach Up is really awesome. Thanks for performing it. It's on your album called The Bigger Picture. Cale, what is the bigger picture to you?
Well, the big picture to me right now, if not to sound too esoteric, but basically I think that there's a conscious revolution that's happening right now. There's so many different issues that are affecting us all, and when I think about being conscious, I think about breaking free of the insular, sort of narrow-minded, self-centered mind state that so many of us are imprisoned by, and just recognizing the connections that we all share with one another and getting a bigger picture perspective of how we're all interrelated, not just with one another, but with the natural world as a whole. And I really feel that there's a conscious revolution or a collective conscious evolution happening right now as more and more people are starting to understand that concept and more people are starting to recognize their own agency and their own true potential, which is a great, great thing.
I couldn't agree more. We're all one human family living on one organism. It's time to start treating each other that way and respecting life and the planet. Cale, where can people find out more about your work?
People can find out more about my music at my website, calesampson.com. Feel free to add me on Twitter at @Cale_Sampson. Look out for the new album, The Big Picture, on iTunes. And I just want to take a second to encourage everybody out there who is aware of this information to not be afraid to speak out, not be afraid to use whatever creative medium speaks most to you to express yourself artistically, because art really has the power to inspire the masses, and with great art comes the possibility for great change, which I know in the long run we're going to do, but the time is now, and we're all in this together.
We all need to be agents of change. Thank you so much, Cale Sampson. Really appreciate you coming out.
Thanks, Abby.
This is about what's really, truthfully going on. Because ignorance is not bliss, and knowledge is definitely power. The truth is that we need to open up our eyes so that we start to see all of the lies that we were told and we believed. Because the time has come to face reality and work together for the sake of liberty, so that our future generation can be free. We need to wake up and see that the truth is not what it appears to be. Truth is, the real reason for war is motivated by money and corporate interest. Rwanda didn't have oil, that's why the world turned a blind eye during its genocide. Truth is, corporations can donate an unlimited amount of money to a candidate. Democrats and Republicans are bought and paid, so government does whatever corporations say. Truth is, the president doesn't run the country. The people in charge are those who control the money, so the Federal Reserve's really more powerful than the U.S. government, and they're running the show. The truth is that Goldman Sachs sold subprime